Hello AP Biology students, we're going to start the third unit called Cellular Energetics. The overall goal of this unit is to better understand how energy is transferred between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And there's going to be an emphasis first on how enzymes help complete this task. Now, to warn you, there are a ton of sections in this unit. This is typically the hardest or most difficult unit in the whole class. With that being said, we're going to start the first section on energy, 3.1. By the time students make it into a 11th or 12th grade AP Biology course, I feel that they should know what energy is. It's the ability to do work. I like to review that kinetic energy is the energy in motion and potential energy is just stored energy. We're going to be typically looking at the stored energy in specific types of bonds and how that energy is going to be released to do work within the cell. Typically in this chapter, again, we're going to be focusing on how energy is trapped by cells in plants by a process known as photosynthesis. And in turn, photosynthesis is able to utilize that energy to make carbohydrates. Now, those carbohydrates are going to be transferred into mitochondria and be broken down, and that energy is going to be used for cellular work. And along the way, at each one of these steps, some energy is lost in the form of heat. But again, overall, we're looking at how sun energy is captured by photosynthesis and then utilized further down the road in cellular respiration. The whole sum of this chemical reaction or chemical reactions within the cell is called metabolism. I like to mention here that the reactants are what goes into a reaction, and then you have the products, which are the substances that are formed by the reaction. Now, we have two different main types of reactions. We have anabolic and catabolic. In anabolic reactions, you're creating larger molecules from smaller molecules. And in catabolic reactions, you are breaking down larger molecules into smaller molecules. Typically, in an anabolic reaction, you are using energy to make those larger molecules. And in a catabolic reaction, you are gaining energy by breaking down those larger molecules into smaller molecules. Whenever we release energy from these types of reactions, this is known as an exergonic reaction. And the example that we talked about before is cellular respiration. This is where we're going to take a carbohydrate, break it down, and get energy to use in the cell. And in an energonic reaction, we are requiring the input of energy. And the example I talked about before is photosynthesis. This is where we're going to use energy specifically from the sun to make a product in the form of carbohydrates. Now, last part of this section is known as energy of activation. This is the energy needed for a molecule to go from a reactant to a product. Or in other words, this is the energy needed for molecules to react with one another. You can see in our two graphs, we're starting with an amount of energy. There's going to be an activation energy needed here, but afterwards, we have energy being released by the system. This is because, again, our end energy is lower than our beginning energy. You can see in the endothermic reaction, we are gaining energy by the end because we are adding energy into the system. And lastly, before we end this section, we're going to talk about catalysts. Catalysts are substances that increase the rate of chemical reaction without itself being used up by the chemical reaction. We're going to learn in the next section that enzymes are types of catalysts since they lower activation energies. You can see our reactants here in products. The reactants have a higher activation energy without the catalyst than with the catalyst. I like using this frog diagram to help teach this concept. You can see in this diagram, we have the frogs here, which are the reactants, and they want to make it to the products here. This is like the nice pool, but they have to expend a lot of energy to get over that activation barrier. With an enzyme, you lower the activation barrier or activation energy needed to get from one side to the other. So this increases the rate of reaction because more frogs are going to be able to make it over with less energy. I saw this meme online and I just had it included. SpongeBob is just 10 out of 10.